If you love pizza, this may be the best smelling office in Seattle.
It's a little ridiculous. It smells really good in here all the time. We are Picnic Works. We're a Seattle-based startup, and we make robotic pizza assembly equipment for restaurants.
Today, we need to talk about something almost nobody in the tech press is treating as the story it actually is. So just imagine this for a second. You walk into a commercial kitchen in Seattle's Interbay neighborhood. There's a 7-foot machine standing where a line cook used to be. Dough goes in on a conveyor belt. Sauce, cheese, and toppings get applied in neat, programmed layers. 45 seconds later, a fully dressed 12-inch pizza comes out the other end, ready for the oven. One person running that machine could turn out over 100 pizzas an hour. No burnout, no turnover, no scheduling headaches. That was the pitch. That was the future. And on May 11, 2026, that machine, and the company that built it, went quiet for good. I'm talking about Picnic, the Seattle robotics startup that spent 10 years and more than $50 million trying to convince the restaurant industry that pizza could be built by robot. Backed by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen's own investment fund, partnered at one point with Domino's, one of the largest pizza companies on planet Earth, featured at CES, written up as the future of food service more times than anyone at the company could probably count. Gone, assets liquidated, headquarters empty, and at least one Seattle restaurant owner left holding $250,000 in machines that no longer have a company behind them. This isn't just a quirky tech fail story for the algorithm. This is a real window into how hard it actually is to automate labor, how fragile venture-funded hardware companies really are, and what happens to the small business owners who bet early on a promise that didn't survive. So stick with me, because this one goes deeper than the headline. Let's get into it. Let's start with exactly what happened, because the mechanics matter here. According to legal filings reviewed by GeekWire, Picnic was unable to pay its debts, and on May 11th executed what's called a general assignment for the benefit of creditors. That's a formal state law process that lets an insolvent company wind itself down outside of bankruptcy court. A liquidator, in this case a Santa Monica firm called CMBG Advisors, takes control of whatever assets are left, sells them off, and distributes the proceeds to the people the company owes money to. Corporate language. Here's what it actually means. Picnic ran out of cash, couldn't raise more, and handed the keys to a stranger whose entire job is to sell off the wreckage. The company didn't put out a press release. There was no farewell LinkedIn post from leadership. Reporters had to go find out for themselves. When GeekWire visited Picnic's former headquarters at a shared workspace development in Seattle's Interbay neighborhood, the second floor was already empty. Other tenants in the building said Picnic had quietly packed up and moved out months earlier. One of them remembered the smell of robot-made pizza drifting through the halls. Another said the trash bins were full of leftover motors and components after the move-out. No announcement, no goodbye, just an empty floor and a legal filing. Now, before this sounds like a small, forgettable story about one failed gadget company, let's be clear about what Picnic actually was, because the scale and the ambition matter here. Picnic wasn't a garage project. It traces back to 2016, when a mechanical engineer named Garrett Oakes started the company under the names Otto Robotics and then Vivid Robotics before it settled on the name Picnic. The idea was straightforward on paper and brutally hard in practice. Build a machine that could handle the most repetitive, labor-intensive part of pizza making, the topping, so that one employee could do the work that used to take an entire kitchen. This is not a niche hobbyist project. Paul Allen's own fund, Vulcan Capital, backed the company's seed round. In 2021, Picnic raised a $16 million Series A. In 2022, it landed a real pilot partnership with Domino's, testing whether robotic pizza assembly could work at the scale of one of the biggest pizza chains in the world. By 2023, the company had grown to roughly 100 employees. Over its full 10-year run, Picnic raised something in the neighborhood of $53 million from investors. This was a company the industry was watching, not laughing at. So what happened? Now here's where the story gets complicated, and I want to be straight with you. because this is where it gets nuanced. Picnic didn't collapse because of one bad decision or one villain. It collapsed the way a lot of hardware startups collapse. Slowly, then all at once. Let's follow the money, because the pattern here is not subtle. In February 2023, Picnic conducted its first significant round of layoffs, citing what its then CEO, Clayton Wood, called the current economic environment. Weeks later, Wood himself stepped down after leading the company since 2019. He'd been the public face of Picnic, the guy showing off the machine at CES, talking to reporters about ski resorts and theme parks and grocery chains lining up as customers. When he left, by his own account, the company shifted into what he described as a kind of stealth mode, a strange choice for a company that had spent years trying to get famous. Michael Bridges took over as CEO in mid-2023 and lasted about 2 years. Under his leadership, Picnic did manage to raise another $5 million, and in 2024 it pivoted its strategy, moving away from pizzerias that wanted lots of custom styles and toward high-volume, low-customization clients like cafeterias, stadiums, and university dining halls. By that point, the company had shrunk to roughly 20 employees, down from around 100 at its peak. Then, in September 2025, a third CEO, Valery Inting, came aboard with yet another new vision. A hospitality-first automated pizza chain, built and operated by Picnic itself, rather than just selling machines to other restaurants. There was a pop-up planned for New York City to prove out the concept. It never happened. 8 months later, the company was gone. 3 CEOs, 3 strategic pivots, 10 years, $53 million, and in the end, an empty floor in Interbay and a liquidator's phone number. I want to be honest with you about something else too, because this matters for how you think about the bigger pattern. Picnic wasn't the first company to try this, and it wasn't the first to fail at it. In 2020, Zume Pizza, a Bay Area company that had raised somewhere around $400 to $500 million from investors including SoftBank, abandoned its own robot pizza ambitions after years of struggling with basics like keeping the cheese from sliding off pies cooked inside moving delivery trucks. Companies with names like Piestro, Basil Street, and Robotics have quietly gone under in the same stretch of years. Miso Robotics, Spice, the list of automated kitchen startups that raised big money and then ran out of runway keeps growing. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. And it tells you something important. The challenge here was never really about building a robot that could squeeze cheese onto dough. The challenge was building one that could survive the reality of an actual restaurant kitchen and the reality of venture-backed hardware economics at the same time. Let's talk about why that's so hard, because the math is not subtle here either. A kitchen is not a factory floor. Toppings behave differently depending on temperature, moisture, and how they were cut that day. Cheese that flows perfectly at 10 in the morning can clump differently by dinner rush. Add in humans constantly moving through the space, ingredient substitutions, health codes, and the simple unpredictability of a working kitchen, and you get an environment that industrial robots, built for clean, controlled, repeatable conditions, were never really designed for. Now, layer on the financial side. Hardware startups need enormous amounts of capital just to build, ship, and maintain physical machines, on top of everything a normal software startup needs. Picnic was raising money through the free money era of the early 2020s, when capital for ambitious, unprofitable ideas was cheap and abundant. When interest rates rose and that funding environment tightened, as it did across the entire venture industry, hardware-heavy companies with high burn rates were among the first to feel it. Wood himself put it plainly afterward. Picnic got caught between that free money era and a market downturn when, in his words, the bottom dropped out. That is not ideology. That is arithmetic. Big machines cost real money to build and maintain. When the money runs out, the machines don't stop needing maintenance. They just stop getting it. Now let's make this real for a second, because the numbers on a spreadsheet aren't the whole story. There's a Seattle restaurant owner named Lee Kindle, who runs a small chain of pizza spots in the city, and was one of Picnic's earliest and most public supporters. Back in 2023, he told GeekWire that robotics was the future of food. He believed in it enough to put the machines in his own restaurants. Today, according to his own account, he's sitting on roughly $250,000 worth of picnic equipment that no longer has a company behind it. He calls it his robot aquarium. Machines that used to make pizza and now just sit there because the company that built them, serviced them, and supported them doesn't exist anymore. He's reportedly frustrated enough that he started building his own robotics venture out of the experience. That's the part of this story that never makes it into the funding round headlines. When a software company folds, a subscription just stops working and you move on. When a hardware company folds, you're left holding actual machines bolted into your kitchen with no manufacturer to call when something breaks. The risk of betting early on new technology isn't evenly shared. The investors who backed Picnic have already written off their loss and moved on to the next pitch deck. The small business owner who bought the machine outright is the one left standing in the kitchen with dead equipment and a real financial hole. And it's not just Kindle. 20 employees lost their jobs when the doors closed for good, on top of the roughly 80 who'd already been let go in earlier rounds going back to 2023. Investors, including a Seattle venture fund tied to a well-known local entrepreneur, saw money that went in years ago simply disappear. Customers like Aramark, Chartwells, and other food service operators that had installed picnic stations in cafeterias and venues now have to figure out what to do with the equipment and where to turn for support. So here's what should concern you beyond just this one company, because this is a pattern, and it keeps repeating. Restaurant automation has been pitched for a decade now as an inevitable fix for the industry's labor problems, rising wages, high turnover, chronic staffing shortages, and company after company has raised serious money on that pitch, built genuinely impressive machines, gotten real press coverage and real pilot partnerships with recognizable brands, and then quietly run out of runway before the technology could mature into something that could reliably run without a team of engineers behind it. Zumi burned through hundreds of millions of dollars. Picnic burned through 53 million. The specific numbers change. The shape of the story doesn't. A compelling pitch meets a genuinely hard engineering problem, meets an unforgiving capital environment, and the result is a shutdown notice instead of the revolution that was promised. So let's bring it all the way back to where we started. That 7-foot machine in Interbay, quietly building pizzas for a curious reporter, for a trade show crowd, for the occasional customer who wandered in wondering if the robot pizza was actually any good. That machine, and the dozens like it installed in kitchens around the country, is still physically sitting there in restaurants and cafeterias right now. But the company behind it isn't answering the phone anymore. The floor where its engineers used to work is empty. The trash bins have already been emptied of spare motors and leftover parts. And the only person still actively dealing with the fallout right now, today, is a Seattle restaurant owner staring at $250,000 of machines. He can't get serviced. Here's the bottom line. Picnic's collapse isn't really about pizza, and it isn't really about robots. It's about what happens when a genuinely hard engineering problem gets sold as an inevitability, and venture capital gets used to bridge the gap between the pitch and the reality for as long as the funding environment allows it. For a while, that bridge held. 10 years, 3 CEOs, $53 million worth of belief that this time the kitchen would finally get automated. But the bridge only holds as long as the money keeps flowing, and when it stopped, there was no revolutionary breakthrough waiting underneath to catch the company on the way down. Just an insolvency filing, a liquidator from Santa Monica, and small business owners like Lee Kindle left to absorb the difference between what was promised and what actually got delivered. That's the real risk of betting early on unproven hardware, and it's a risk that keeps landing again and again on the people who can least afford to eat it. I want to hear from you. Have you ever used one of these automated kitchen setups? At a restaurant, a stadium, a cafeteria? Did it actually work the way it was supposed to? Are you watching this same pattern play out in your own industry, with your own vendors? Drop it in the comments, because these stories matter more than a single, quiet liquidation. Filing might suggest. And if this video gave you something to think about, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the stories underneath the headlines. Hit Hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Stay informed, stay sharp, and never stop following the money. I'll see you in the next one.